like very antsy teenager and whatever
Right.
to a place where you're more comfortable with yourself?
I think it's just accepting it. Like, I just accept the fact that I'm an angsty teenager who's a nonconformist who is this, you know, like, I think a big part of it was I stopped caring, not stopped caring, obviously, but I stopped letting what other people think influence me so much that I had to force myself to change for them. You know, like, yes, there's some level that I had to change for people, to better communicate with them and all of that. But a big part of it was just finally accepting, yeah, this is me.
I guess the office or the job or whatever, like coming into that place, what did you think?
Right. I think the first impression I had of that office was it's a really quiet office. I mean, I guess I wouldn't expect anything more for a job that works with a lot of developers and are always in computers.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fairly quiet office, which I think, looking back now, is surprising to think about, especially since, for those who don't know, we work for a startup company of sorts, a tech startup company. So
Of sorts.
of sorts. I was used to working for startup companies where people are talking and coming up with ideas and debating and stuff like that. But also, obviously, working, and if you're developing, then the computer with it. But there was more conversation there was less conversation than I was used to walking to this company. So I think, looking back now, that was weird to think about. The other one was, I'm used to being thrown into the fire with stuff, but when you were, I think, one of the first people that was introduced to me to onboard me at work, and it seemed like you weren't quite sure about what to show me at that point. I'm like, well, this guy's been there for a year and he still doesn't know. Is this like this guy's fault, or is this the company's fault? Or is that he doesn't know what he's doing? I mean, I think we eventually found out whose problem that was.
Yes,
it's the company's, but but no, it was good to begin with. The people seemed nice, so that was nice.
I don't know if I've mentioned on this podcast, but I did quit, and I'm no longer working at the office we're talking about. But as far as work goes, in my opinion, you seem to be someone who has like a very strong notion of how work should be done.
Right.
And why and how do you think work should be done? Is that too general of a question?
No, I think...
Yeah.
Why and how do I think work should be done? For me, it always begins with the person. I know that there's a lot of conversations now with corporate work talking about it. The customers are always first, or the customers are always right. But I think for me, it always goes back to the employees are first. And employees are not right, but the employees always come first. And that's because it's very reflective as a customer when you walk into a business and know whether this is a good business or not, when you see the employees are happy or not. I think my biggest example of this was when I used to work for a restaurant where the floor manager was a little bit of a misogynistic, sexist dude. And the head chef was this very flexible, great listener and very empathetic person towards her staff. And you could see the difference between the quality of service versus the quality of food from the two sides of the company. That you could see that the kitchen staff would help each other out, would communicate more openly, and eventually create better product compared to the service staff who would be for eternity being confused about what they're doing. And would blame... the kitchen staff would tend to blame the service staff for being like, well, they just don't know what they're doing, they're just inexperienced. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't think it has to do with just experience. If they don't know what they're doing, then maybe teach them what they're doing. I think that's kind of how I believe work should be. Is it always goes back to the people that are in it. I'm a firm believer of communication and team mindedness when it comes to work over talent, and that's because some people, I've experienced a lot of times where people with good talent just can't express or use that talent if they're not able to communicate properly with everybody else. I know there are a lot of scientific studies that go into this already and talk about how proper team communication are better than that. But I really am a firm believer of it. And I think the reason goes back to my dad. When I was growing up, he was one of the first people who got into computer science in the Philippines. If anyone doesn't know, I'm Filipino.
Oh, yeah.
And he got into computer science back in the, I'd like to say 80s or whatnot in the Philippines. And he worked for one of the bigger companies down there. And that company started off with typewriters. It was still an old company. The computer age hasn't quite come to the Philippines at that point, and he was trying to help bring it to the company. And with him, he knew that it was a little bit of a struggle, mainly because the CEO of the company was this very old school, controlling freak kind of boss who would micromanage the shit out of everything. It came to the point where he would tell me stories about how they were building this building, and down to the type of nail that they would put into the building.
Wow.
He would have to approve that, the number, the size, the type.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and it's, some people believe that. I'm not a big fan of that way of managing people, but that was the kind of boss my dad had to deal with. But what was amazing about my dad was he found a way to get through to him. He might not have changed his management style, but he found a way to adapt his way and listen to his boss and be able to translate it down. And a big part that he found out after talking to his boss about getting the computer aged in there, because he was a little bit reluctant, the boss was a little bit reluctant about bringing computers to the company. One of the things he realized was that it wasn't that he didn't have the money for it or he didn't like computers. It was more that he didn't understand it, nor was he was worried, and actually ultimately afraid of computers, I think, because he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know what to do about it. And my dad heard that loud and clear, and he eventually found a way to get them into the computer age, if you could call it that. And how he did it was he got the CEO, the whole board of directors, the entire executive group, essentially, to sit down in a boardroom one day. And he gave each of them a computer. And instead of teaching them how to use a computer, he gave them almost essentially just two instructions. One, to turn on your computer, and two, to open this program called Solitaire, which is a game.
Yeah.
And he taught them how to play that game with a computer. And what he told me why he did that was because it's quite simple in that he said you can't do proper work, or you can't love what you're doing or love what you're using if you don't actually love it or enjoy it. So why not start with the fun side and then teach them everything else once they got that? I think that was the first lesson I had growing up about how to work with people. And then I grew up working in team sports and playing in team sports, like football, basketball, and all of that. Even when I played wrestling, it was always, the coach we had was always teaching us about how to learn from your teammates and communicate with them what your weaknesses are so you could learn from them. I was lucky enough to be in those places where I learned these skills. And also unfortunate enough to work in companies where they didn't have this and realize the big difference between them. And I think the last one was I tend to, this is a little bit of a selfish maybe move of me, but I like listening to the employees that aren't bosses. I'm not a suck up.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I don't have the drive to be a boss or whatever.
I think aside from that, there's also just like giving the little guy a voice has always been controversial. Like, just plain and simple. But it's like a lot of the times when you want to find out the real story, it's often like the kitchen staff or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. And you could hear and learn a lot about a company by talking to them. I tend to like talking to janitors, for example, in offices, or the front desk people. Heck, when we were doing that research, I was like, okay, go straight to the office admin people, because they're usually the ones who want to speak up and talk and all of that. But yeah, I think, long story short, I'm probably going to cut half of this story, but long story short, that was it, really. Like, listen and, like, truly listen and learn to appreciate the ones who aren't managers, because the
Mhm.
manager's job is that.
Yeah, to listen to understand rather than to listen to be heard.
Yeah.
And in talking about the little guy, this might be racist, but in talking about the little guy and the oppressed one, you are Filipino, like you mentioned, and
Right.
not only are Filipino people known for being hard workers, and I've noticed in North America, a lot of companies have like Filipino workforces. But
Yeah.
in speaking about the Philippines, introduce us to the Philippines and how you grew up and where you were born in the Philippines, your family, etc.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna speak on behalf of myself as a Filipino, I guess.
I don't want you to speak for all Filipinos. Yeah.
But I grew up actually in the Philippines, in the city, Quezon City, which is, I guess, kind of in the heart of the urban side of the Philippines. And I grew up fairly privileged there. I was probably like a upper middle class family there. We weren't rich in that sense that we could just buy whatever we want, but we were well off, you know.
Mhm.
We had a nice house. We had people to help us with stuff. We didn't have to depend too much on ourselves to do things. We were able to do things out of our choice rather than out of necessity.
Mhm. What did your parents do?
So my mom was a teacher.
Mhm.
She started her own school, kindergarten school in the
Okay.
Philippines, which
Okay.
actually caused controversy because I was the valedictorian of that school. when I graduated. And also her partner's son also was my co-valedictorian, so it was a little bit sketchy.
Okay.
No, but
now we know why you are quote unquote successful in life.
yeah, but I think that was more of a testament to the fact that my parents were teachers rather than my
Yeah.
mom owned the school.
Yeah. You had the benefit of
Yeah,
like,
so there's definitely bias, but not the kind of bias people might have thought. But my dad was a computer IT guy, I guess. I honestly have no idea what he did day to day. But he eventually became, they created a special title for him in a company in the Philippines, one of the
Mhm.
biggest companies there back then, where he became the special assistant to the president. Not as dirty as you think. It's actually an executive position in the company. He eventually became that.
Yeah.
But he was the one who ran the first single number delivery system in the Philippines. You know
Mhm.
how when in Canada we call 310-10-10 for Pizza Hut?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So back in the day you would call like one number per store, right?
Oh, okay.
So he was the one who started the first one number for the whole company for delivery in the
okay.
Philippines.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
it was 9111111 for Pizza Hut there.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, he worked for the company that owned Pizza Hut in the Philippines.
Oh, cool.
Which had so much perks because they also owned like the Coliseum where all the basketball games were played. We had free tickets to Disney on Ice and
Oh, wow.
everything, you know.
Yeah.
But as much as he was an executive, he wasn't like super rich or whatever. We
Mhm.
were just well off enough to get by in that sense.
And like professionally, because you spoke a lot about the things you noticed he would do in
Right.
in his workplace and stuff like that. Are there lessons you recall him teaching you growing up? Or
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
A lot of the lessons I learned growing up was because I was a piece of shit.
Explain. Now this is the good stuff. Why were you a piece of shit?
Oh man, I was not a good kid growing up. I would fight everybody.
Physically?
Both physically and verbally. My parents were great people, are great people, I think, until now. And they were patient with me. For me, I think, I don't know, always grew up feeling like I was a very different person in the sense that I always had a hard time. I always thought a friend, like when you're making a friend, right, you're trying to sync up with them, like a phone pairing with a Bluetooth, whatever. And for me, I just couldn't pair with anything. Like, people just did not get me.
Yeah.
And maybe it's obviously some level of teenage angst in there, and maybe some level of me not knowing how to communicate as well. But that was me growing up, and I think it was tough because I would fight everybody. I had a short temper, so my dad and I would, whenever they didn't agree with something that I liked, then I would just fight them, or not fight them, but answer back or stand up for whatever I.
May I ask what you were fighting? What were you
There's
fighting?
little things. It'd be like I'd be up all night, and then I'd be. I was a smart ass. I think that's the best way to put it. I was a smart ass with a short temper. But at the same time, obviously, being the firstborn of the family, my parents were trying to figure their parenting out too, and I was not the easiest one to deal with. I mean, it began with 27 hours of labor to my mom, so
Yay.
I was born on Mother's
Oh,
Day. Actually, I was.
snap.
My mom went into labor the day before Mother's Day, and I was born on Mother's Day.
Oh, nice. I don't know if that's nice, but whatever.
Yeah.
So in being a shitty, because I know I might be jumping ahead, but I know you moved to Vancouver or Canada as a teenager.
Right.
What is the difference between being what is the difference between having that teenage angst in the Philippines versus doing that here?
Right. I have no idea. I think the reason why is because I moved when I was 15, which any
May I ask why you moved? Why did you move from the Philippines?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
My parents grew up fairly religious or Catholic, I guess, and they ran a community there where they helped couples and single people who are about to get married and young couples kind of connect themselves to the faith. Not just in like a we have to go to church every week kind of thing, but really more in a spiritual level of how do you identify yourself and how do you learn how to love yourself and love others kind of way. So part of the reason why they ended up moving was they, I guess during their prayers or something, felt like God was calling them to move here. And then we kind of just moved. My dad was running successfully a couple of businesses. He was starting an internet cafe at some point. They were expanding and all of that. And he decided, yeah, I'm just going to... He not retired, but quit his job with that company and decided to be an entrepreneur at that point. My mom, I think, did the same, or not gave up, but left the school already, sold the school, I think, or something like that, because we lived further. Yeah. And then they just felt like they were being called, so they dropped everything and just left. And
what did the 15, right? What did the 15-year-old you think of that decision at the time?
Oh man, I didn't talk to my parents for a while, and I was mad. That's
like the worst time to move.
Yeah, I was gonna say, right? Like any parent out there, do not move when your child is 15. Yeah. Especially, I think, when your child is 15 and also just is going through a whole world of things, you know. I think it was the timing of everything. I think when I grew up as a kid, I was bullied a lot in school, and I guess bullied is a weird way of saying it, because I was also a guy who didn't take anything, so people would make fun of. Yeah, I was picked on, and I'd pick back on them too. So it's a little bit of a give and take there. But I'd have fights in school. My mom's side of the family is 27 cousins in there, where 5 of them are women, and 22 of them are guys. And the age range is from, right now, I think the eldest is like 45 and the youngest is 20. So there's like at least a 20-year gap there. I'm stuck in the middle of that. So there's a hierarchy of hazing or family bullying that goes on there.
It's a rite of passage.
Exactly. So all of this was happening. During my 14, 15, I was going through that, plus like all the teenage angst. And I don't know, I was never diagnosed with that. I was probably going through depression through that time. I was struggling with living, I guess.
Is there an open line of communication between parents and the kids in the Philippines, like culturally? Because in Africa there isn't.
I don't know. I think my mom tried really hard to keep that line open, but I think it was more I just didn't. Okay. And it wasn't, I don't think, my parents, and I actually respect them for this looking back, but they never sent me to therapy for it. Because then we worked on it as a family and dealt with it. They learned how to be patient and going through this obviously tough time for me, but I wasn't having none of it, you know, like I'm a kid, I was a kid.
And so now they tell you we're moving and you don't talk to them for a long time, there's obviously preparing to move. You still have to prepare to move anyway.
Yeah.
So what was that like? Leaving your friends and all the stuff you knew?
That was hard.
Yeah.
I like, especially for me, because I said, right, like all that bullying, it was hard for me to find a group of friends. There was a time where I was struggling for some reason. I didn't understand why I couldn't keep a group of friends together. I don't know if it was me. I don't know if it was them. I don't know honestly why it was. It came to the point where I'd have groups of friends, and then I'd just get messages being like, "Hey, how was the party last weekend?" And I'm like, "What party last weekend?"
Yeah.
I wouldn't get invited into stuff, and I'm like, "What am I doing?" Clearly, they wanted me there, but they forgot about me. Am I just the kind of person who's being forgotten? So there was a lot of that, right? And that was painful to go through. So with that, plus the bullying and everything, like I was not. I mean,
wait, so then were you relieved to leave, or
no?
Okay.
So that year,
Okay.
the year I found out was the first year I found a group of friends.
Oh damn! Oh fuck! Fuck.
Yeah. So that was it. And it was one of those. My parents never told me until they decided to move, or that until they were committed to moving.
Yeah. Because your opinion doesn't count.
Yeah. So it was straight out of what was it? It was a one day. I just had a good day with my friends. They just left the house because I lived that was my first year of high school, so grade 8, I guess here, or grade 9 or something. In the Philippines, it's called first year high after you graduate. Grade school is first year, second year, third year, fourth year. So it was my first year of high school. We moved closer to my school, where you could literally climb up the stairs and get to my classroom. And for the Philippines, for people who don't know, it's traffic as hell everywhere. Getting to places is ridiculous. So this kind of luxury is out of this world, right? So after school, my friends would come over every day. We'd play basketball because we had a basketball court at home, or play video games or whatever. So it was one of those really good days. I thought, like, shit, man, things are starting to click. Then my parents, after my friends left, they were like, all right, boys, my brothers and I, they sat us out in our prayer room because we had like this little space, an altar of sorts, I guess, where we could reflect and pray. And sat us there, and they said, yeah, so we're going to Canada. Like, what the fuck?
Oh, damn.
That was tough.
I can't even imagine what that's like.
No. And I think it was hard, too, because, like I said, I was going through a lot of stuff. I wasn't the most social person. Like, while everyone's worrying about getting laid or whatever, I was trying to figure out, am I not going to try to commit suicide tomorrow or not? Like, that was my legitimate issues growing up, right? Like, I had no time to worry about relationships, let alone friends, when I was struggling through that growing up. And then when high school came, I was just learning how to make friends. And then this happens, and I'm like, all right, thrown to a new place.
Shit.
And they throw me straight into an expensive Catholic private school.
Sorry, one question. Did you act out in any way before you moved? Or
man,
did you
like,
just
I acted out a lot growing up.
Okay.
Like, my mom and I would fight quite a bit.
Yeah.
My dad and I have had a weird relationship back then because he wouldn't talk to me anymore, kind of thing. Or not talk to me anymore, but like, there's always that friction between us. But now it's better now.
Okay.
And, most of it's really my fault being an angsty teenager. But.
Yeah. So now you moved to Canada. They put you said, in an expensive school?
Yeah, so we went to like a Catholic private school growing up. Man, but then like that place was full of either super rich white dudes or the rich Chinese folks who wanted to give the best education to their kids. So there were some Filipinos there, of course, because it wasn't that expensive, I guess. But so I got to know people eventually, but I think, man, that was tough for me too, because there were times I remember first week I'd just sit down in the. This is so sad. Just sit down in the toilet and start eating my lunch there and just try to disappear.
Shit.
You're struggling, man.
Stop, dude. Nah, that's fucking just sad because it's sad, like heartbreaking.
Yeah, because I mean, like, I'm not a social kid too.
It's unfortunate that, like, because as a kid you don't have, at least as a kid in that situation, you don't have the tools to figure out what to do. So it's like, okay, I just need to be away.
Yeah,
at the very
exactly.
least. Yeah.
It wasn't. I think of it as sad now, but I think back then I was just like, I just don't want to deal with this. Like, I'm almost happy I went through all that struggles before I moved to Canada, because that hardened me already.
I guess so.
Like,
you're used to
fight with people, having to know how it feels to be a nobody, how it feels to have nothing.
That's true.
Left, like, like I legitimately have scars on my hands for certain reasons that we don't have to talk about here. Like I know how it feels to drown because because that's happened. I
can't imagine that as a kid, like you had to kind of get over that even before moving. But
Yeah,
at least it
man.
kind of helps you because you're like, okay, you've been through this before.
Yeah.
You know what it feels like to be an outcast.
No, yeah, I've
Yeah.
always been an outcast. I don't know. I think I am at least,
Mhm.
and I think it's because I'm okay with doing my own thing. I'm also because I was different. Like I probably didn't make it easy to be
Yeah.
just like everyone else because I didn't like.
But
I naturally didn't like things everybody else liked. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's because I intentionally wanted to do it, but
yeah.
I don't know. When people like Michael Jordan, I liked Reggie Miller. Like
Mm.
I can't stop myself if I like that. You know.
Yeah. And it's
so-
like at those points it's usually like there's no one around to tell you like, yeah, it's kind of okay to like this instead of
Yeah.
that. So it's
Yeah.
a weird. So how was it growing up in this new strange place?
It's
Did you
hard.
like your school initially, or
I was
what-
okay with it.
Okay.
I don't think I loved.
I mean, you were avoiding stuff, but other than that, was it like? Did you see any silver lining to this whole experience?
Yeah.
Initially.
The silver lining was it was an all boys school
Okay.
because then I didn't have to deal with
That kind of pressure.
communicating with girls
Yeah.
while also
Mm-hmm.
dealing with all this immigration
Mhm.
stuff, and so there were the ego element of boys
Yeah.
weren't as visible in that school.
Mm.
One of the probably silver linings of an all boys school is you
Mhm.
don't have to have that.
I can definitely
there.
co-sign that because I grew up in a boys' school.
Yeah. And I grew up in an all boys school all my life.
Yeah,
so
same.
actually, it's funny stories of like. I think at some point I got into a cheerleading team where I wasn't a cheerleader. I
had
was like one
those?
of those lifter people. This was in the
Oh, okay.
Philippines, so I was the ones that would toss the girls up
Yeah,
or lift
okay,
them
okay.
up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there was
you were a
one.
macho cheerleader.
Yeah, it's a fat one at least. Maybe I was too bouncy. The girls just bounced off me or something. But man, I was so bad with girls back then. Like
Mhm.
I remember that time. There was this one girl who I thought was really cute and everything, who was just left after practice. It was just me and her waiting for our rides to get home. I think I was like 12 or 13 this time. And I knew her name. I knew what school she was in because I've heard I was a wallflower growing up, for people who might know what that
A
means.
wallflower?
Wallflower. You know, like
What's
when
that?
you go into a room and there's just this plant that makes a place pretty, but nobody really
Okay.
pays attention to it.
Oh, okay.
I was that kind of kid. I was like an outcast and a wallflower,
Okay.
or a nonconformist and a wallflower. So,
Mhm.
like I said, I didn't make things easy
Yeah.
for myself.
Mhm.
But it was just the two of us, and I kind of knew a lot about her, or not a lot, but enough for like the small talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess she didn't, so she started asking, "Hey, like, what's your name? Like, I've seen you, blah blah blah." I'm like, "Well, my name's Mik."
Yeah. That's it.
Okay. What school do you go to? Because it was an inter-school thing. It wasn't
Yeah.
like a school
Ah, okay.
cheerleading squad.
Yeah.
It was a community, whatever. I was like, "Yeah, I went to Ateneo." And okay.
Mhm.
So why are you cheerleading and all of that? I'm like, "Oh yeah, I don't know. My mom told me I could do it." So that was kind of the whole conversation.
Yeah.
Eventually, I guess she got uncomfortable, obviously,
Mhm.
probably.
I wonder why.
And she started talking about how, yeah, I got, like, my mom's not going to be here for a while. I have to wait here for a couple hours. So I'm just going to chill and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Eventually, I think 5-6 minutes later, my mom eventually came. So
Yeah.
it's like, all right, see you later.
Mm.
And I remember driving off, and my mom's like, "Who's that girl?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, she's from the cheerleading squad and everything." Okay.
That
So
was
is
it.
she getting picked up? Like, yeah, in like 2 or 3 hours. My mom gave me the biggest slap in the head. I was like,
Oh, wow.
"Wait, so you told me you
Good
didn't
guy.
even offer a ride to a girl who's gonna be there for 3 hours?" I'm
Yeah.
like, no.
I mean,
I
hey,
was
she's
just
not
not
she's not our child, so
Yeah, exactly. In
Yeah.
my mind, I'm like, well, why?
yeah, it's like it's not our problem. So take us through. So that was like high school, I guess, right? Was it? It was
That incident was like grade school.
Oh, that was grade school.
High
sorry.
school, I
Yeah.
was in. I had 1 year in the Philippines,
Yeah,
which
and
was
then
great because I met people and I was
Okay.
finally feeling like I was
Yeah.
finding myself. But
Yeah.
then high school here was, I guess, different. But what helped, I think, during high school here was we lived close to a church community, Catholic church, St. Joseph the Worker,
Mhm.
here, and great community. I think I mentioned to you the past.
Yeah.
This is a kind of place where I've had a friend, my brother's friend actually, who's now married to his husband, once met our pastor there, Father David, and he came up one day and just said, "Man, if you were just my pastor growing up, I'd still be Catholic. I'd be a gay Catholic, but I'd still be Catholic."
Yeah.
And I think a big part of it was because he built a community of people who listened, who understood. He understood people. He was also a big gamer and everything, but that was a fun story. But he really listened to people and understood how people lived and breathed, and not listened to the Bible or whatever. But also listened to just the energy of God or whatever, like whatever you want to call it, right? Yeah. But like understood what it actually meant to love. Taught us there. So I grew up there, and I think met a few people there too. So I ended up volunteering a lot in the youth program there.
Okay. Were you religious, or is it just?
Oh yeah, back then I grew up. I was quite not religious, I guess, but I believed.
Okay.
When you had nothing to believe in, that helped.
That's true.
And I met a good community there, so I figured, hey, they're great people. I might as well follow that. And, that's kind of where it went. And I also worked while volunteering there, plus played sports in school. So keeping myself busy helped keep me sane, essentially.
And it seems to me like this idea of communication is like the common thread, at least when it comes to the moments where you felt uncomfortable. Right. Communication seems to be the thing. Is that the reason? I don't know what you think about it, but is that maybe the reason why you felt as a kid that you just never understood people, or they never understood you? Was it a communication thing, and maybe you just didn't understand it as communication when you were younger? Or
maybe. I mean, I still go through it until now, right? Like,
true.
I think it happens with everybody, and I think maybe I just realized it earlier on that their perspective of things is different from my perspective of things, which means in exaggerated terms, what he sees as an apple might be a different thing when I see it as an apple. Like we have very different perspectives in life, and maybe I understood that earlier on in my life, and that's why I had a hard time syncing with people, was because I kind of knew that we were different, and I was okay with it. While I don't know, maybe people today or the people I knew then were just okay with assuming things and not thinking about those things. So.
Are there other examples of people who you've kind of gone past that point with, aside from your church group?
Of what?
Like, are there people who you've... Because it seems like the church group and maybe the few friends you made the year before you came are like a group of people where you felt, okay, we've gotten over that hump of communication, and like we actually understand each other. Yeah. Are those maybe like the only two times you really felt like you got through to people, or they got through to you?
Yeah, I think so. Especially that... Yeah, I think like especially with that church group, they were one of the few people who really took the time to understand me. I think that was a big thing too, is that the old friends are friends... I'm putting air quotes like people can see it, but friends that I had might have just taken me as a member of the group and never really sat down to take the time to understand who I was as a person. But the church group and some friends from high school and people who kind of sat down, and I got to know, and we got to know each other, and we got to understand each other. It's just, I mean, surprise, right? Like
when you listen to people, you understand them.
The more you get to understand me, the more we can really grow together, which I think you could say for everything.
That's what I was gonna say. It's like that's for everyone, but there's something about maybe like the first few moments and what happens there when you interact with people that determines how the rest is gonna happen. And it's like sometimes you have control over it, sometimes you don't.
Well, it's balancing that fear and trust, right? For me, when I meet somebody, I'm
open.
Like, here, meet me now. Like I told my girlfriend now, right? I said, I'm not gonna hide anything from you. If you can't be honest with me, then this is not gonna work. Because if we're gonna do this, and she's okay with it, right? I'm not saying that like she didn't know this, right? This is how I go forth with when I date or meet people. I'm like, this is me. I'm not gonna try to hide stuff from you, because if we're gonna be friends, then we're gonna have to do this. If you can't do this, then we're not gonna be friends. Like for me, I open the door right away. And then if you don't want that door open, then I'll just close it. No big deal.
And you just mentioned your girlfriend quickly, and we talked about how you are lucky enough to grow up in a boys' school and not have to deal with that whole dynamic, but it seems that you got past that at some point.
So 29 years later.
What was your first experience having to deal with, okay, I'm a dude, there's girls here, and every
Right.
other dude expects me to be talking to girls too. What was that experience like? Or what was that first experience?
Honestly, for me, it was always a struggle.
Yeah.
And I think mainly because I just wasn't that kind of guy.
Mhm.
And this, again, makes it harder for me to be a dude with all the dudes. 'Cause
Yeah.
people, some people assumed I was gay for a while because
Mhm.
of the way I was and
Mhm.
all of that. I mean, like I said, I'm a very open person. I'm just I've become very comfortable with, I guess even back then, despite going through the struggles of anger and blah, blah, blah. Even back then, I was a fairly comfortable guy with, like, hey, if I can cook, I can cook. If I could sew, I could sew.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was a bad thing.
Mhm.
I didn't my parents didn't teach me this, like, standard that to be a man, you have to
You
be
must
this.
do such and such, yep.
Yeah, and credit to my dad, maybe because he didn't want to talk to me, but I don't think he taught that to my brothers as
Mhm.
well. My parents, as much as we fought growing up, were, I mean, fucking amazing. Like,
Mhm.
I can't have any better parents than what they did with me.
Mhm.
The patience and the knowledge and not forcing stuff, but letting things happen. And they're going through their own self-identity thing now, which is amazing. But,
Mhm.
yeah, no, for me it was hard because I wasn't that kind of dude
Yeah.
when it came to girls. Like, I liked girls. I was in high school here in Vancouver. I was eternally the gay best friend, in air quotes, of a lot of girls because I just listened.
It makes sense. Girls are more open to emotions and stuff, and
Yeah.
they express that more freely. So
Yeah.
if you happen to be a sensitive or maybe a open guy, you're not gonna necessarily find a male equivalent as fast as you'll find a female one.
Oh, freaking hard to
Yeah,
find one. And
yeah.
a lot of the guys I met who end up. I'm shocked. I don't have friends who are like. I don't have a lot of gay friends, nor do I have a lot of flamboyant friends. Most of my friends are a wide range of people.
Mhm.
Right? Like, I'm not saying because I'm like this, I don't have jocks
Yeah.
as friends.
Yeah.
And they've learned to open up with me too. Over time. Even in high school, I've met them in their vulnerable moments. But yeah, like you said, generally, women got to do that. But to answer your question of how I was with girls, I was terrible. I had no idea who liked me, who didn't like me.
Yeah.
I didn't even know how to ask a girl out. I think the first time I met a girl and... Not the first time I met a girl, I meant. Like, the first time I tried to ask a girl out, I just fumbled my words and everything. I remember in college... My first year of college, I met this one girl who I liked in class, so I decided to skip class and pretend to ask for notes from her because I missed class or whatever. So the next day I went up to her and I butchered that completely. Because I went up to her and I'm like, hey, notes, just borrow, like, your paper class, because I missed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
That's better than what I said.
Dude, I don't think for me personally, I could probably count the number of times I actually pulled off I even attempted a strategy to talk to girls when I was young, because I'm far from that guy myself as well, so I totally relate.
Yeah. But that girl, her and I ended up becoming really good friends, and not anymore. I think it's because I think she liked me, and I think I liked her too. Like, it's one of those, like, I wasn't good with girls. Like, this whole semester with her, I was, every class, every break, Tuesday, Thursdays at least, we'd have lunch and dinner together. Sometimes she'd invite me over to her place and we'd play video games, and then she'd invite me to her bedroom to teach me how to use Photoshop.
Damn,
and
she took you all over the house.
I was legitimately, there was a point where we were just sitting beside each other in her bedroom, and she was teaching me Photoshop, and I legitimately thought she just wanted to teach me Photoshop.
Whoa, okay, I wasn't that. Once
that's
I got
bad
close,
I was.
yeah, no, that's terrible. Yeah, that's really bad.
The big part of it is because that's not my thing. I honestly never found sex to be interesting or even
Oh, really?
exciting.
So this is just something that, okay, I didn't know it went that deep. Okay.
Like, for me, I don't know if we're going to go here, but, like, for me, when I masturbate, it's like a biological necessity.
Oh,
it's
wow, really? Okay.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Even I talk to my girlfriend about this sometimes. Like, for me, I like cuddling, but doesn't mean I always want to have sex. Like, it's...
I wish we started this conversation here. It's like, I feel like there's so much to talk about at this point.
Yeah, that's why I asked you, like, what do you
Yeah.
want to talk about? Because I could talk about, like, I've had a life.
Yeah. So, like, okay, because we're gonna have you on again, but like, without going too far into that, but now as, like you said, a 29-year-old now living in Vancouver,
Right.
do you feel more settled now? Do you feel,
Yeah.
what was that? You said yes. So what took you from being that very angsty teenager and whatever
Right.
to a place where you're more comfortable with yourself?
I think it's just accepting it.
Mhm.
Like, I just accept the fact that I'm an angsty teenager who's a nonconformist who
Mhm.
is this, you know, like, I think a big part of it was I stopped caring, not stopped caring, obviously, but I stopped letting what other people think influence me so much that I had to force myself to change for them.
Yeah.
You know, like, yes, there's some level that I had to change for people, to better communicate with them and all of that, but a big part of it was just finally accepting, yeah, this is me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with it. Like,
Yeah.
why do I have to think otherwise about it? Why do I have
Yeah.
to think of this as a... That's why I think we talk about it sometimes. I say, like, I don't like seeing things as good and bad. I just
Mhm.
think of it as there is.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
just there.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just weird. I'm just
Yeah.
I'm just not sexual. I'm just not
It's
like
just
that. Like,
that's the problem with humans. We're always trying to put a label on
Yeah.
things, and it's probably an evolutionary thing, I think,
Right.
to a degree, where it's
Yeah.
like we always have to label things so we know if it's dangerous or not.
Yeah.
But it started working against us in the sense that, like, what you're saying happens.
yeah,
Yeah.
just let it be.
Yeah.
I think, and obviously there's a balance of it. I think it's... I don't think I've figured anything out
Mhm,
or
mhm.
got anywhere. I'm just comfortable now.
Like
where
the
I am.
comfort, yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's so important to find that comfort. I feel like that's step one, because
Yeah.
for me, I feel like I'm slowly finding that comfort
Yeah.
in who I am and
Yeah.
accepting me. I'm a sensitive
Yeah.
guy and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
and just take it. I mean,
Mhm.
guys, stop trying to be this macho ego guy. Like, honestly, it doesn't even help anybody that you're like that anyway.
Mhm.
And
at
yeah,
the end of the day, no one gives a shit about anyone.
yeah,
It's literally just no one cares.
yeah. Like, I don't know why you're pounding your chest and trying to act like this super
Yeah.
cool. If that's your thing, go for it, man.
Mhm.
Right? But if you're just doing this to try to impress somebody or try to convince yourself, because that's really, for me, that's always how it comes across. Anyone who's trying to be a jerk or trying to scream their opinion on somebody just sounds like somebody who's trying to convince themselves of
Mhm,
it.
mhm,
Like,
yeah.
you're not convincing anyone because you're not convincing yourself about
Mhm,
this thing.
mhm.
So just relax, take things as it is. Like,
Mhm.
stuff happens, and a big part of it is really understanding the balance of who you are and your selfishness, like what I want for myself, but also knowing that you exist in a world of everyone else trying to do this. So don't try to just throw yourself into everybody else at the same time. And it's just balancing that. And then making decisions about it, knowing that you're not... I think when I was mentoring a bunch of high school kids, it's the first thing I told them. You don't have to know what you want to do for the rest of your life. You just have to know what you want to do today.
Mhm.
You know, like if you're going to go to school or if you're going to go... And this applies for anybody. Like, my parents are, like I said, going through this life thing now, and my mom's asking, oh, should I be this or that? I'm like, I don't know, but pick one.
Yeah.
Do it for 3 months, because you have the luxury of doing that.
Mhm.
And then just go.
100%. And that's exactly what I'm doing personally, because like I said, I quit the job where Mik and I met, and I'm in a place where I want to take that time to be like, okay, what is all this about? And like, let's figure out a place where I can choose to go by myself and not let it be like, it's not a decision I'm making based off of like external stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important. What are some of the things you have put this kind of energy into? What are the things you're working on right now,
Right.
on a personal level, whether it's like anything creative or whatever? Like, what are some of the ways you're exercising your acknowledgement that communication is important?
Right.
Yeah.
I think right now it's like I said, this is the first actual girlfriend I've had ever.
Okay.
The longest relationship I've been in is like 2 months. I've been with my girlfriend now for almost 6-7 months, I think. So
Wow.
it's like forever for me already.
Yeah.
But learning how to communicate with her has been great, because then she's a great communicator as well. And learning, I've put my time in us trying to understand each other and knowing what we both want and expect from each other, and just really not having any holds bar about it. I mean, obviously we fight and there are disagreements with stuff, and with those times we just let the feelings pass and then have a conversation when we're a little bit more level-headed. There's no "I want this now" kind of thing.
Yeah.
But on a more creative side, like I mentioned, we're working on a podcast called The Academy, which
this
is
on the Geek Happy Network.
Yeah, on Geeky Happy Network, where it's kind of about a teenage girl going through her identity, and in a world where there are these mystical masks that offer some kind of power. Kind of helping out with that and working in there, but I think now I've realized also after talking to a few people that I've always intended to be a designer, and not a designer in the sense of like creating art and all of that, or graphic design, but in experience in communication design, which is really talking about understanding people and how they interact with objects and all of that, like how they experience things rather than creating the interface that they experience these things in. I'm in communication design, which is really how you communicate, how you build elements of a thing to make it communicate. What to create in a product or a manual even to communicate things properly with the user. Those are the things that I wanted to do from the beginning. I just wanted to do project management because I needed my bills to be paid, but also because that there is skill that you need to learn from project management. But now I figured I learned it, and now I'm going to go explore that, which means kind of applying it in the Geek Happy Network now. But I think, like I said, I'm leaving in work in a couple of weeks, so now I'm going to be able to finally give myself that time to actually design and start even just drawing out ideas I have a few product ideas I just want to play around with, like even just little things, just like thinking of a way to get my bags hanging properly in my room, like just little things like that, and being that kind of, I guess, tinkerer again of that sort.
Yeah, so. At the end of the day, everything starts with yourself and like your own space and your own mind and all that type of stuff. So
for sure. Yeah, so that's kind of what I want to get into now, and getting back into writing as well. So, like Mike's right, like we said, the Academy, actually, I'm just producing it, so I'm mostly a producer at the network, but I want to actually create my own work. So I've always been a gamer, so I might be writing short stories on a game that I play,
nice.
Stuff like that. But also looking into, actually, side note that I don't know if this is, I might as well mention, is that as I like, it's weird, like I'm a gamer, but I also like the environment, which is a weird thing to do.
Oh, because gaming negatively affects the environment?
Well, it's just like I'm a couch potato, but also nature.
Oh, you mean like you like to be in nature and stuff like that?
Yeah, but I'm also a couch potato. So
okay.
there's that balance that now I'm trying to figure out in my life of like, do I let go of my gaming or do I? Because obviously it is just me trying to run away from problems sometimes, right? But,
I mean, we all need that escape.
Yeah, but I legitimately enjoy it too. So balancing those two and trying to figure out how I could build a career somewhere there. I mean, that's.
I just thought about a question like, do you miss home? Because I feel like whenever I talk to you, it's like we talk a lot about culture and identity and all these things, but for some reason when I speak to you, I don't get the sense that like home of the Philippines, let me not say home, but the Philippines is such a not a big part of you, but like it's not this. You've kind of let go. At least, like for me, you can kind of tell I'm still very Kenyan. Like, when I talk, it eventually leads to a place where I'll talk about Kenyan things because that's what I can relate to. Do you feel more Canadian now, or what's that like?
Well, I've always been Filipino. I've always seen myself as Filipino. I think the big shift now, because 2 years ago I always still missed going back to the Philippines, meeting my family, and being one with my people, or if you call that. But the one thing I realized about the Philippines is that, for the people who don't know, we've eternally gone through political struggles, from problems with corruption to issues here and there with terrorism and all that. The Philippines has always put itself in this cycle of turmoil, and I think this is a terrible thing maybe to say, but I find that maybe Filipino people don't have it in them to have that skill of leadership quite yet. We're not ready to be leaders, and I think I just talked about this with a friend of mine actually, that I started seeing the Filipino people as a group of people rather than a country. And maybe that's why you get that sense from me. And for me, that's kind of where I've come to be. I can't stop missing. I had to stop missing myself. I had to stop missing home or the country of the Philippines, because it's so painfully difficult to think about it. I know so many people who try to work so hard in it, but it's such a tangled up mess that you had no idea where to start, and it's tough to see that. But I also see that there's so many Filipinos out in the world, who are misrepresented, misunderstood, and misappreciated everywhere. Like, we're always, for some reason,
but that's what I was saying, like in the
people who
beginning.
need help,
yeah,
right?
it's like you guys. By you guys, I mean Filipino people tend to always be like the core of big companies here.
Yeah.
But like, what's the story? I never know what's up like with Filipino people.
I think we lack that education into leadership. We're trained. I mean, the Asian culture of management is so weird, and so far from what I agree on. I think working in our last place might be a small example of that. But we were never really good at leading, and for some reason, I don't know if innovating even, like coming up with ideas. Like we were known for inventing some stuff before, but at the heart of it, it's hard to see how people are creating stuff right now in the Philippines and being led. And I think it'll take time, and I think there's hope in that sense. But even, like I said, there are issues in the country, but there are issues with our people here in Canada, here around the world. Like I mentioned before, in Hong Kong, you have Filipinos who are seen as just slaves or maids or second-class citizens to their masters or their homeowners or whatever. Like, that's happening everywhere here, And the Filipino people outside of the Philippines is a completely massive group and very in need of proper representation and proper respect. I think there's this lady, Regina, I think her name is, in Google. She's like OG Google employee, right? Like, her first name is, her email is like firstname@google.com. Like, nobody has first name at google.com anymore. Everyone has like first name, last name at google.com. Like, she's that OG. But she's a Filipino woman who's an engineer. A software engineer, I guess. Like, she breaks all these barriers, right? An amazing, brilliant lady. And she started the Filipino Google Foundation in Google because she realized the same issue where she had a WhatsApp group with all the Filipinos there, and this is the most Filipino thing, by the way. I don't know, like maybe in Africa too, right? Like, we talk about food. That's it. Like, food and family, we're good, right? So for them, they had this
Throw
WhatsApp.
in a little gossip.
No, social for real. So they had this Filipino group with her and like a bunch of service staff, mostly in the kitchen. We're all Filipino. And they would talk about which cafeteria in Google had
the best
the
food?
Filipino food
okay.
cooking that day. So then they would go there. And she realized, like, man, I'm the only engineer of all the Filipinos in this group. Why is that? Right? And is there a lack of education? She's worked or tried to really establish and work on that in the level of Google, of saying, how can we make Filipinos move up in that? Because we do have, I believe, I don't know if this is unique to the Philippines, but from my experience of the Filipino peoples, we have this really almost innate ability to be empathetic towards people. We're the most emotional people out there in the world, right? Like, we're the most emotional culture out there, and also somewhat empathetic. But that raw strength, that raw skill, or raw inherent culture in us has to be trained and controlled and developed like anything else.
It can't just be handed out for free everywhere, left, right, and center.
And it's not going to get great. It's not going to be usable. And like anything, right? Yeah. Like, maybe Caucasian cultures were developed to be more leaders, and great. But a lot of people believe they're leaders, but probably should be trained, right? So it's very different. But I think, that level of empathy and communityness, I guess, or whatever. Like, I don't know how you call it. Collective.
Just community. I
Ability
guess.
to be able to work with other people
Mm-hmm.
is so inherent in the Filipino culture that for me, if you teach these people the right skills, teach them how to code, teach them how to design, teach them how to think bigger than what they're given, because a lot of them don't know. You know, that's what drives me nuts about a lot of cultures and all of that, is that, or a lot of countries and all of that, is that they blame these minority classes, or they blame these lower income families for not growing and excelling, even though we have programs available for them. And I'm like, well, A, are these programs designed for them, or B, are they even able to access these programs? I'm not saying like access these programs as in they can apply for it. I'm saying, can they apply for these programs for their side of things? A low-income family might not have time, might not have the ability or literally the knowledge to know that they're actually worthy to go there, right?
Yeah.
So how do you provide them with that level of empowerment and understanding? Because for me, if you had, like you said, and I'm biased in what I'm saying, so I'm happy that there's a non-Filipino person saying it for me, right? But like for me, if you put a group of Filipinos in a company, like I'm putting my thumbs up, like people are seeing this, but for me that would help increase the communication of your company in some ways, because there's an inherent level of appreciation.
There's that
empathy that we
understanding.
have,
This it's so important to have that understanding,
Yeah.
and it's like, just like we were saying, I think again it always starts with that comfort zone first of like, okay, I accepting one another, yourself, etc., and then from there everyone can kind of just like succeed as a unit. And it's like that cooperation, I mean, that cooperative idea is also very African too. Like we also have that thing of things work when people understand one another first and foremost, before anything else.
Yeah, and it's obviously easier said than done, because
sure.
to actually create that is hard. It's not the easiest thing. You have to work with so many different people. Great, but it's the exciting part of globalization today, right?
Yeah.
This is, like, people talk about, for me, I believe globalization is not even here yet, right? Like, we're just beginning to learn how to understand and grow as a world rather than a country. So this is or as individuals. So this is a very interesting time in the world for us to do a lot of these things.
I mean, in the interest of time, as you have noticed, there's so many other things we could have talked about, but we'll have him on another time for sure. Like I said, Mik is helping us out with coming up with this podcast and putting it out there for everyone to listen to. And thank you for coming.
Yeah, of course.
It's been a pleasure, like, just hearing a few more nuances to your story despite knowing a lot of it. But thank you. And